Aho, di show da bula shanina hu. Bibulagosh bagarag. Biabsalagag. Amalewa ichigash by wag. Digusha hobang. I introduced myself in my language, which is Apsalaga, Crow, to maybe some of you are aware of Crow people. We're from southeastern Montana. We are a Northern Plains tribe. So my name is Nina Sanders, and my clan is Whistling Water. I grew up in southeastern Montana. I was raised by my great-grandmother. And when I was about 19 years old, I moved to Phoenix, Arizona, where I worked and I got into education, worked in libraries, and then eventually I started doing work with preschool to 12th grade. I taught art and obviously curriculum, things of that nature, and then eventually I was hired on as a cultural advisor, which meant and that was for teenagers, which meant I was always just getting after teenagers, telling them, like, what are you doing? Your people are strong. Sit down and listen to what I'm telling you. Some of them absorbed some of the knowledge and went on to do really great things and go to college, which I'm thankful for. And eventually what happened was I started working in early childhood development, which essentially is grant funded through states and some of the federal government, because a lot of the research that they've been doing has shown that 0 to 5 is where most of the brain development happens. And when you have families, parents who are nurturing and providing secure attachments to this very young age, they are less likely to commit crimes, be involved in violent behavior, they're more likely to finish high school and college. So in this work, what I wanted to do, because all the education work that I was doing was on the reservation, I realized that there was an indigenous component that was missing to our children's education. We're obviously getting reading and writing, science, math, all of these different things, but because we're losing our language, there had to be new creative ways that we engaged our children on the level of who we are as indigenous people. And so one of the things that I did was, because my hobbies are, I bead, I make moccasins, I weave yavapai baskets, it was to try to teach the parents how to make something with and for their children to engage them on an entirely different level. And so what I did was I went to some of the nearby museums, took photographs of the dolls, went through their reports, found out where they came from, how they were made. Dolls have been made all over, all over the world for children, obviously. But with North American tribes, they made them for different reasons. Obviously, as you know, in Hopi, Kachina dolls were made originally to educate young children, and they were given as gifts during certain ceremonial cycles. With Navajos, dolls were not made at all. They weren't made until tourism came. And with my tribe, we made dolls for our children as far back as we can recall. It's part of our oral history. So what I did was I created a presentation for parents. I talked about our people made dolls. This is why we made dolls. And then we actually made the dolls. And I used photographs from museum collections, the National Museum of the American Indian, Charlotte Hall, which is in Prescott, the Arizona State Museum. And that was very successful. I had a lot of parents who wanted to make more things, and we talked about early attachment theory, which is basically what I told you before. It's the neurobiological development in small children that helps them to essentially just be better people when they grow up. And when I started doing that, my professor suggested that I apply to an NMAI internship, which I did, I got. I ended up working in archives. I started doing work for the Crow tribe, which if you go to the Smithsonian Online Virtual Archive, if you're an internet person, you can type in William Wiltshute or Crow, and you'll find a finding guide that I created for my tribe, for NMAI, which applied the Crow language. I described parades, I described all of their clothes, I talked about all of our chiefs, who they were, how they became chiefs, our systems, our clan systems. And then I attached names to people who were not identified. And I did that by going back to my tribe and talking to the elders. And then I returned all those photographs to them, which was a huge step for an archive for the National Museum of the American Indian, because obviously archives want to protect these images for the purposes that once you put something out there and it becomes public domain, it can land in anybody's hands, it can be used for anything, and the information attached to that may not be correct. So when you see a picture, a historic photograph, be aware of that if there's information attached to it. So once I did that and I was with my tribe, we have an issue in museums that I don't know if you're aware of. It's not here at SAR, because they're on top of their game in the IARC, but so we have medicine bundles or sacred bundles that were collected in the early 1900s because people were being put on the reservation, they were being Christianized, and those objects are really, really powerful. On the collector's market, they're worth a lot of money. And we weren't trying to repatriate them because they're individual objects. The things that we did want to repatriate, we did. But a lot of the collections people were, what do we do with this? How do we handle it? Does it need to be covered? Should it be stored up high? Should women touch it? So while I was at Crow, I met with the culture committee and a lot of the elders, and we just hashed it out, and we worked out some guidelines, and we provided them to the collections people at the National Museum of the American Indian, as well as with archives. We don't show pictures of Sundance. We don't show photographs of bundles open. We don't show photographs of interments. So once I finished that, I applied for SAR, and then I came here. I was at home for maybe 4 weeks, and now that I'm here, we're sort of essentially working on all of the components of what it is to work in museums, which is really important for Indigenous people because we're starting our own museums on our reservations, and we don't have conservators. We don't have people who work in registration and understand these systems. So that's something that I'm learning here. I'm also learning a lot about the different pueblos. I have 2 little boys who are Hopi. So I know a little bit about Hopi. But I didn't know very much about the northern pueblos, so I'm being taught a lot. I'm learning a lot. And it's an incredible, powerful experience knowing that you have the support of these huge communities, museums, the School for Advanced Research, your own people, my own people, and to just get that kind of encouragement, it compels you to keep moving forward and to do this work because it is important. It's important for us to be able to communicate what our objects mean to us, to help researchers understand. I think that it makes research far more interesting when you have the ethnographic work as well as the oral histories. So those are things that I'm doing. We will be, as Michael said, we will be curating the paintings out in the wall, in the hall, and then over in the vaults, there are the pedestals. Sayeko and I will be curating that as well. Our theme is water because of, I'm sure everybody here has heard of the Dakota Access Pipeline. We're looking at that. And a lot of, just all across America, we've been having issues with water and its use, and obviously traditional people, we see water from a little bit different perspective, and I'm sure you understand that. So we're kind of talking about what water means to Indigenous people, in particular the Pueblos. And then as far as my research project goes, which could change, but I kind of have an idea of what I'm going to do today, and that's identity and gender construction in past, present, and future. We'll talk more about that later. Thank you very much for having me. It's nice to see all of your lovely faces. Oh.